What happens when a man who survived public humiliation, courtroom battles, and global judgment sits across from someone who believes he still owes the world an explanation? Johnny Depp thought he was there to talk about art, survival, and moving forward. Joy Behar thought she had unfinished business. What followed wasn't an argument, it was an erosion, and by the time Johnny stood up, everyone in the room understood something too late. Some questions don't seek answers, they seek surrender. The studio lights were warm, almost flattering. Autumn tones filled the background, soft oranges, muted golds. The kind of set design meant to signal comfort, safety, familiarity. The kind of place where difficult conversations were supposed to feel gentle. Johnny Depp sat with one leg crossed over the other, hands folded loosely in his lap. His navy suit was tailored but understated. The tinted glasses masked his eyes, but not the fatigue beneath them. He smiled politely as the applause faded, nodding once to the audience like someone acknowledging weather rather than celebration. "Johnny Depp," Whoopi Goldberg announced warmly. "It's good to have you here." "Thank you," Johnny said. His voice was calm, measured, almost soft. For a few minutes, everything went exactly as planned. They talked about film, about returning to set, about creativity after silence. Johnny spoke carefully, choosing words like an artist choosing brushstrokes, not to impress, but to avoid misinterpretation. "I don't think of it as a comeback," he said at one point. "I think of it as continuing. I never really left what mattered." The audience murmured approval. Joy Behar hadn't spoken yet. She sat slightly angled away from him, chin tilted, hands folded over her cue cards. She was listening, not with curiosity, but with inventory, waiting. "So, Johnny," she said finally, smiling as she leaned forward, "it's been quite a few years." Johnny turned toward her. The smile stayed. Something else hardened behind it. "Yes," he replied, "it has." "And during that time," Joy continued, her tone conversational, almost light, "you've been very public, very present. Courtrooms, headlines, opinions." A pause. Johnny nodded once. "That's true." Joy's smile widened, just a fraction. "Some people might say you've told your story many times." Johnny didn't answer immediately. He adjusted his cuff, then looked back at her. "I've answered questions I was asked," he said. "There's a difference." Joy let out a small laugh. Of course there is." Whoopi shifted slightly in her seat. "But I wonder," Joy continued, "do you ever worry that by continuing to talk about it, by continuing to frame yourself as someone who's been wronged, you're keeping the wounds open for yourself and for others?" Johnny's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I don't frame myself as anything," he said evenly. "I responded when my name was attached to accusations. Silence wasn't an option." Joy raised an eyebrow. "Wasn't it?" The air changed, not dramatically, not yet. Just enough that the audience leaned forward without realizing it. "You know," Joy said, tapping her card lightly, "a lot of people watched that trial. A lot of people formed opinions. Some felt justice was served. Others felt concerned." Johnny tilted his head slightly. "Concerned about what?" Joy shrugged. "About power, about influence, about what happens when a beloved celebrity tells his version louder than anyone else." Johnny's smile faded. "Not fully, but enough." "I didn't have the loudest voice in that situation," he said quietly. "I had a microphone in a courtroom where evidence speaks." Joy nodded slowly, as if indulging a child. "That's one way to see it." Johnny's fingers curled once, then relaxed. The audience felt it now, the tension slipping under the surface like a fault line. "But let's move away from that for a moment," Joy said breezily. "I want to talk about accountability." Johnny looked directly at her. "Go ahead." Joy smiled again. This time, it didn't pretend to be kind. "Do you believe," she asked, "that winning a case means you're morally absolved?" The room went still. Johnny didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was colder than before. Not louder, not sharper, just clearer. "I believe," he said, "that truth doesn't need moral theater." Joy leaned back, lips pursed. "Oh, Johnny," she said softly, "we're just getting started." And everyone watching felt it. This wasn't an interview. It was a test. Joy didn't rush. That was the mistake people always made when they tried to provoke Johnny Depp, thinking pressure had to be loud. Joy understood something subtler. Pressure could be patient. It could smile. It could wait until the room felt comfortable again. And then lean in. "You know," she said, folding her hands, "when we talk about accountability, we're not just talking about courts, we're talking about culture." Johnny remained still. The tinted glasses hid his eyes, but not his focus. He nodded once, an invitation, or a warning. "Culture," he repeated. "Yes," Joy continued, "because trials don't happen in a vacuum. They shape narratives, and narratives affect people, especially women who feel they're not believed." There it was. Not an accusation, not yet, just a doorway. Johnny inhaled slowly. "I agree. Narratives matter." Joy smiled, encouraged. "So, let's talk about that narrative, the one where you became, overnight, a symbol. Some would say a rallying point." Johnny tilted his head. "A symbol of what?" Joy shrugged lightly. "Of fighting back, of pushing against allegations, of winning." She paused, then added almost gently, "At someone else's expense." The studio felt smaller. Whoopi glanced down at her notes. Another host shifted in her seat. No one interrupted. Johnny's voice, when it came, was even. "The expense you're referring to was paid long before a verdict, in reputation, in work, in silence." Joy waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, come on. You're Johnny Depp. You weren't exactly silenced." A ripple of nervous laughter from somewhere in the audience, quickly swallowed by the tension. "I wasn't heard," Johnny said. "There's a difference." Joy leaned forward now, but Amber Heard was heard first. The name landed exactly as intended. Johnny didn't flinch, but something behind his stillness tightened. "Yes," he said, "she was. And many people," Joy continued, "believed her. Because historically, women haven't been believed." Johnny nodded again. "That's true." Joy's eyebrows lifted. "So when you decided to take this to court, to make it public, did you consider what message that would send to other women who might be afraid to come forward?" There it was. The question that wasn't really a question. Johnny exhaled through his nose, slow and controlled. "I considered what it would mean to let a lie define my life." Joy's smile thinned. "A lie?" she repeated. "Yes," Johnny said. No hesitation, no heat. "A lie." Joy crossed her arms. "That's a strong word." "So was abuser," Johnny replied calmly. The audience inhaled as one. Joy didn't look away. "But the jury didn't hear everything, did they?" Johnny's jaw tightened. "They heard evidence," he said. "They heard recordings. They heard testimony. They heard what was legally admissible." Joy nodded, unsatisfied. "And yet, some people still feel the spectacle turned something deeply serious into entertainment." Johnny leaned back slightly. "I didn't ask for cameras. But you didn't stop them either." Silence. Johnny looked directly at Joy now, glasses angled just enough that she might have seen his eyes. Sharp, tired, unblinking. "I didn't stop breathing either," he said. "Should I apologize for that too?" A murmur rippled through the audience. Joy chuckled dryly. "You're very good with words." "I had to be," Johnny replied, "when mine were all I had left." Joy tapped her cards again. "Let me ask you something very plainly, Johnny." Johnny waited. "Do you understand why some women watching this might feel re-traumatized seeing you celebrated after that trial?" The room froze. Johnny didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice had changed. Not louder, not harsher, colder, sharper, stripped of patience. I understand trauma, he said, intimately. I understand what it means to be disbelieved, to be mocked, to be reduced to a headline. Joy opened her mouth, but Johnny raised a hand, just slightly. You asked, he continued, so let me finish. He leaned forward now, elbows resting lightly on his knees. What I don't accept, he said, is the idea that one person's pain requires another person's silence, or that truth must be sacrificed to preserve a narrative that feels more comfortable. Joy's lips pressed into a thin line. So you're saying, she replied, that anyone who questions how this played out is just protecting a narrative? I'm saying, Johnny corrected, that questioning is different from prosecuting someone who already survived it. Joy scoffed. Survived. Johnny looked at her for a long moment. Yes, he said quietly. Survived. The word hung there, heavy, unmovable. Joy shifted in her seat. You know, Johnny, some would say your fans turned that trial into a kind of sport. Memes, cheers, mockery. Johnny nodded slowly. I can't control people. I couldn't control the storm before either. But you benefited from it. Johnny's smile returned, not warm, not friendly. Benefit implies choice, he said. I chose to tell the truth. The rest happened whether I wanted it or not. Joy leaned back, exhaling loudly. You're very practiced at deflecting. Johnny met her gaze. And you, he said, are very practiced at pushing. The tension was no longer subtle. Joy smiled again, but this time there was irritation behind it. We're just having a conversation. Johnny nodded. No, he said softly. We're circling something you're determined to say. Joy's eyes flashed. And what's that? Johnny paused. That I should still be apologizing. The studio was silent. Joy opened her mouth, and that was when she decided to go further, much further. Joy didn't hesitate. That was the moment Johnny knew. Not when the questions got sharper, not when the name was said out loud, but when she stopped pretending this was a conversation. You know, Joy said, tilting her head, voice deliberately measured. Some critics argue that the trial wasn't really about truth at all, that it was about reclaiming control. Johnny didn't move. Control, he repeated. Yes, Joy continued. Control of the narrative, control of public sympathy, control over how history remembers you. She glanced briefly toward the camera. And whether or not that control came at the cost of someone else's credibility. Johnny's fingers tightened together once, then loosened. You're implying intent, he said. That's different from analysis. Joy smiled thinly. I'm implying impact. The studio felt airless now. Even the lights seemed harsher. And let's be honest, Joy added, leaning forward. You're not just any defendant. You're Johnny Depp. You have fans, money, influence, lawyers, platforms. She paused. Amber Heard didn't. There it was. Johnny's jaw set. She had representation, he said evenly. She had her own voice. She had every opportunity to present her case. Joy waved a dismissive hand. Come on, power dynamics matter. A jury of strangers doesn't erase decades of imbalance. Johnny looked at her for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter than before, dangerously so. Are you saying evidence doesn't matter? I'm saying context does, Joy replied quickly. And context includes how society treats men like you. Johnny nodded slowly. Men like me. Yes, Joy pressed. Men who are adored, protected, excused. Johnny leaned back in his chair. For someone who talks a lot about accountability, he said, you seem uncomfortable with facts. Joy's eyes narrowed. Facts can be interpreted. Truth isn't, Johnny replied. A murmur rippled through the audience. Joy inhaled sharply. You know, Johnny, one of the most disturbing parts of that trial wasn't the allegations. It was the cheering, the laughing, the way a woman's pain became content. Johnny's voice hardened. You think I enjoyed that? Joy shrugged. I think you didn't stop it. Johnny laughed once, not amused, not friendly. Stop it how? He asked. Should I have apologized for defending myself, for refusing to accept a label that wasn't true? Joy leaned closer now, emboldened. Some people would say yes. Silence slammed into the room. Johnny's smile vanished completely. Say that again, he said. Joy didn't blink. Some people would say that when women speak about abuse, men should listen, not litigate. That was it. The room knew it. Johnny knew it. He removed his glasses slowly and placed them on the table. His eyes, clear, exhausted, razor-focused, locked onto Joy's. You don't get to rewrite what happened, he said. Not here, not like this. Joy lifted her chin. I'm asking what accountability looks like. No, Johnny corrected. You're demanding submission. Gasps from the audience. Joy scoffed. That's dramatic. Johnny shook his head. What's dramatic is suggesting that defending oneself is an act of violence. Joy opened her mouth, but Johnny continued, voice cold, controlled, precise. You've taken something that destroyed years of my life and turned it into a talking point, he said. You've reduced evidence to optics, trauma to ideology. Joy bristled. You don't get to lecture me about trauma. Johnny leaned forward. I lived it. The words landed heavy. Joy's expression flickered, just for a second, before hardening again. And yet, she said, many survivors watching this don't see you as one. Johnny's eyes didn't waver. I'm not asking them to, he said. I'm asking to not be used as a warning label. Joy crossed her arms. Public figures don't get privacy. Johnny smiled again, but this time it was empty. There it is, he said. That belief. That because my face is familiar, my pain is negotiable. Joy shifted in her seat. You chose this life. Johnny nodded once. I didn't choose to be lied about. Joy exhaled loudly. So, you're saying everyone who still questions the outcome is wrong? I'm saying, Johnny replied, that you've turned questioning into punishment. The audience was dead silent. Joy's voice sharpened. Maybe people just don't trust men who always cast themselves as the victim. Johnny stood, not abruptly, not angrily, just deliberately. I didn't come here to convince you, he said, and I'm done being examined like an exhibit. Whoopi finally spoke, alarm in her voice. Johnny raised a hand. No. Joy looked up at him, incredulous. You can't just walk away because you don't like the questions. Johnny looked down at her. I can, he said, because these weren't questions. He picked up his glasses. They were accusations dressed as concern. Joy scoffed. That's your interpretation. Johnny's gaze was ice cold. And this, he said, is my boundary. The studio felt like it might crack. Johnny reached for his microphone, and Joy realized, too late, that this wasn't a debate anymore. It was an ending. The click of the microphone echoed louder than it should have. Johnny placed it carefully on the table, as if precision itself were a form of restraint. The audience didn't move. No applause, no gasps this time. Just the heavy, unmistakable silence of a moment that had gone too far to be walked back. Joy broke it first. So that's it? She asked, incredulous. You're leaving because you don't like being challenged? Johnny didn't look at her right away. He straightened his jacket, smoothed the cuff of his sleeve, every movement slow, intentional. Then he turned. No, he said. I'm leaving because you stopped listening a long time ago. Joy laughed sharply. That's rich coming from someone who controlled the narrative for months. Johnny stepped closer to the table, but not toward her, toward the center, toward the cameras. You want to talk about narratives? He said. Let's be honest with the people watching. The director hesitated, then stayed live. Johnny looked directly into the lens. "For years," he said, voice steady, "I was told to stay quiet, to accept what was said about me, to disappear politely." Joy rolled her eyes. "Oh, please." Johnny didn't even glance at her. "I was told that defending myself would make things worse," he continued. "That silence would look noble. That truth would eventually surface on its own." He paused. "It doesn't." The audience leaned forward as one. "Truth only survives if you're allowed to speak," Johnny said. "And today, I wasn't." Joy stood abruptly. "That's absurd. You've spoken for hours on every platform imaginable." Johnny finally turned back to her. His expression wasn't angry. It was finished. "You asked about accountability," he said. "Here's mine." He gestured lightly toward the desk. "I showed up. I answered respectfully. I stayed calm while you circled the same wound over and over, not to understand it, but to reopen it." Joy scoffed. "That's your opinion." Johnny nodded. "Exactly. And I'm done offering mine to someone who only hears what confirms her position." Whoopi stood. "Johnny, wait." Johnny raised a hand again, gentler this time. "Whoopi, I appreciate you," he said sincerely. "But this conversation crossed from inquiry into spectacle." Joy snapped. "So you're the victim again." That was the last strike. Johnny didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "No," he said quietly. "I'm the man who knows when the room has decided who he's supposed to be." Joy folded her arms. "Running away doesn't make you right." Johnny picked up his sunglasses. "Neither does pushing someone until they leave," he replied. A murmur rippled through the audience. Johnny stepped back from the table. "For anyone watching who's been reduced to a headline," he said, eyes on the camera one last time, "you don't owe your pain to anyone's ideology. You don't owe your silence to anyone's comfort." Joy laughed again, thin, brittle. "Nice speech." Johnny nodded once. "It wasn't for you." He turned and walked toward the exit. Behind him, Joy called out louder now. "History will judge this moment, Johnny." He stopped at the edge of the set, didn't turn around. "It already did," he said. "That's why I'm leaving." The studio doors closed behind him. For a moment, no one spoke. Joy stood frozen, jaw tight, eyes darting as if searching for control that had already slipped away. Whoopi exhaled slowly, one hand pressed to the table. The other hosts stared at their notes, anywhere but at Joy. Finally, Whoopi cleared her throat. "Well," she said carefully, "we're going to take a break." The camera cut, but the damage didn't. What began as an interview had ended as something else entirely. Not a victory, not a meltdown, a boundary drawn in full view of millions. And Johnny Depp didn't need the last word. He already took the only one that mattered. Some moments aren't loud, they're final. Johnny Depp didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue for approval. He stood up and walked away. If you believe silence can be stronger than shouting and boundaries matter more than winning arguments, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments, did Johnny do the right thing by leaving, or should he have stayed and fought back?